Thank you very much for coming, dear panelists. I'd like to go over the agenda with you. You can download it via the document button. I believe that my colleague Emna has also sent you some materials. So here's a brief summary. We are waiting for our regional director, Professor Adebayo Olukoshi. Mr. Bilal will be following him. He'll be presenting on Mauritania. Then my colleague Emna, followed by Souair, will be introducing the panelists. They'll be followed by Mr. Hisham Kouhail for the Palestinian case. Mr. Kabine Sissé for Guinea will be speaking. Then Mr. Sam Alfandaka for Malawi will be speaking, followed by Mr. Nabil Bafoun, who will be speaking about Tunisia. That's the summary of our meeting today. Then Ms. Souair Adine will be summing up the meeting, and Professor Adebayo Olukoshi and Mr. Bilal will be speaking to close the meeting. Mr. Olukoshi is from International IDEA, and Mr. Bilal, once again, is from Mauritania. You can consult the agenda in 3 languages by clicking on the document button on the right. Thank you.
Make it very quick, and I apologize. This is one of the challenges of organizing life online in the context of the COVID pandemic, and I think it speaks directly to some of the challenges which we also face organizing elections in the context of the pandemic and carrying on everyday life. But I was saying basically that I was delighted on behalf of all of the management and staff of the Institute, particularly the Africa and West Asia program, to thank our panelists for accepting the invitation to be part of this conversation, which will be focusing particularly on ways of addressing the challenges and perhaps even taking on some of the opportunities.
Apologize for this. Emna, can you please intervene? We have lost Adebayo. So would you please moderate and give the speech to one of our panelists, please? If you are listening to me, Emna, please.
Yes. عسلامة عسلامة مرحبا بكم الناس الكل. Bonjour. Hi.
Good evening, everyone.
For this. And أحيل الكلمة now إلى السيد محمد بلال.
I will give the floor now to Mr. Mohammed Val. So that he could start this meeting. I apologize, Mr. Chairman, and he is the president of the Arab Institute for the elections and the president of the election committee in Mauritania. Thank you very much. Peace be upon you and the blessings of God. First of all, I would like to congratulate and salute and thank our colleagues and partners at the IMEA and all the participants in this webinar. And I would like to thank them for all this great effort that they are undertaking for the elections in Africa, West Africa, and West Asia, and the entire world. This webinar is an exemplification of this effort, and we want to thank them dearly for that. We are now facing 2 principal necessities, and we must bring them all together. We have to respect the election times and timetables, strengthen democracy, reinforce institutes and institutions and give the voters and citizens their right to express their opinion, express their wish and their will in the elections at the right time. This is one necessity, and the other necessity is the health and the safety and security of the citizens within the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. In order to compromise between these two necessities, we are really facing two difficult choices, because we have to compromise between these two necessities, these two needs. The international community did not reach a comprehensive solution for all countries and left it to every country, to every institution to do as it sees fits according to its own circumstances, health and social circumstances. This is why we see that some countries have canceled some elections that had been programmed already, and some of them had postponed them. Some of them canceled elections, and some are still studying this possibility. There is a lack of international understanding and agreement. However, so every country and every commission must think and use the experiences of others to reach the best possibility, the best way to compromise between these two necessities, which is democracy and safety. And from here, we can see and understand the necessity on the needs of these webinars. We are facing great challenges. The experts will talk about these challenges. And especially the director of the Arab electoral bodies commission. So I will say that we have great challenges, general challenges for all elections, starting with the laws or the draft laws or draft bills that have been discussed so far. And these have been instituted to be handled or to be dealt with in a regular session, in a regular time, not within the context of the pandemic. The applications or all sorts of behavior during the elections and after the elections, these are all things that need to be revisited in some countries, including Mauritania, from which I'm speaking to you today. There is a great challenge with regard to the electoral list, the electoral registers, the list of electors, the presence of the elector, or the fact that the elector, a person or voter, can come and record or register himself. It is very difficult, because it is very difficult to get together and to find transportation. So it is very hard for us to conduct any kind of statistics to know how many people have reached the age of voting, legal voting age. But the citizens have the right to vote. So what can we do? People are used to rallies and great meetings and the speeches on the streets and speaking to electors directly. And the electors want to listen and to hear the candidates and to really hear what their program is all about. And right now, they are not able to do so because of the the laws or that are implemented right now because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is very difficult to hold these kind of meetings. It's difficult for us to even hold these kind of meetings that we hold together usually. So how can we hold elections? We have to think about alternatives so that the electoral campaign could be held in a way that would allow the candidate to speak directly to the electors, and the electors could have equal opportunity to vote and to have access to the candidate. And after that, we have the election day. The overwhelming culture here in Mauritania is a direct contact culture. The candidate or the voter comes personally to vote and to express his choice and his will. So how can we change these huge lines, crowded lines, and the need for masks and for testing and for all kinds of measures before, during, and after the elections? How can we find different alternatives? How can we rely on electronic ballots? It is very weak, and not all citizens have access to a computer or to the internet on an equal basis. And of course, all the challenges that are faced by any kind of online voting, or any problems or deficiencies that are contained in that kind of voting. So this is what makes election day, or the election day, very difficult for us. Mail-in ballots, could they be an alternative? The mail-in ballots are not an alternative because most of the postal services in most countries in Africa are almost inexistent right now. So these are part of the challenges that we have to face because of this pandemic. We have to think of this together, and we must find a solution to reach some kind of compromise that will allow us to respond positively to these challenges. We want, of course, the elections to take place, but we want the elections to have some kind of credibility. We see that we know that if elections are held in circumstances that do not guarantee justice, it will lead to maybe violence. It will lead to, for example, we see that in what happened in Mali. All of these things are these aspects we will talk about in this webinars, and we want to listen to you, and we want to thank you for your presence with us, and may the peace of God be upon you.
أنا آسفة المعذرة على عدم
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for not being able to share my screen with you. There is a technical challenge, and I hope that the next speaker will have a good voice. And I thank Mr. Chairman for this introduction, for these challenges that he has talked about, and we will try to respond to these challenges within the work of this webinar, so that we can see all the challenges that the electoral bodies are facing in Africa, West Asia, and the Arab world. And I believe that these experiences would allow us to learn and have and share some experiences from different areas and different administrations, so that we could learn from one another without any delay. And Before I give the floor to Mrs. Suhail, I would like to introduce the speakers, and I would like to introduce Mr. Hisham Kohel, who has a master's in philosophy from Great Britain. He was the dean of practical arts in Palestine, and he worked at the Ministry of Education, and he has more than 14 years of experience in the elections, the area of elections. He is now the director of the election administration in Palestine, and he will introduce to us an overview of the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic during the elections and different phases of the electoral campaign.
التي اعترضتها. وسيبدأ في عرض تجربته السيد كابيني سيسي رئيس اللجنة.
Mr. Kabine Sisi will start giving his presentation, and before becoming a president for this commission, he has an economic background. He has a master's in BA from Conakry University and 2 masters. One of them is a master's in dynamics and implementation of development from Sorbonne University in Paris. In addition to this, Mr. Kabine Sisi had several activities, and he has a large experience in the community since 2002, and he worked as the director of the awareness committee in Guinea before becoming a head of the commission. And then Mr. Sam Alfandika will take the floor. He is the general director of Electoral Commission. He has more than 15 years of experience in his country, in Malawi, as well as on the international level, since he worked as a consultant in the United Nations Development Program in Malawi, Nigeria, and Iraq. We will end with Mr. Nabil Bafoun. He is a lawyer. He graduated from the Law University in Tunisia and from the Higher Center for Judges. He has a master's on the electoral crimes. He has more than 10 years of experience in the elections, and he worked also, and then he was elected as the Director General of the electoral management bodies in Tunisia since January 2019. The moderator of this session will be Mrs. Suhail Abidin. She is the Director of Electoral Procedures Department, Central Election Commission, Palestine. She has an experience of 15 years, during which she worked on several topics as the training and legal aspects of the election, supporting the women's rights, and she is an active member on the regional level, since she worked in several commissions as observer for the elections, in addition to her participation in several activities, forums, as well as activities on the Arab and regional level, as well as the Commission for the Women Participation in Election. Without further ado, I will give the floor for Mr. Shinkir. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Emma. Mr. President of the organization, I'm so happy to see you through this platform. We would like to thank the IDEA and for this opportunity to cooperate between both the organization idea and electoral management bodies in order to convene and hold several activities through the program, the cooperation program related to the challenges imposed by a COVID-19 pandemic on the elections. Our presentation today, if I was able to share it with you, let me see how to do it. You can see it, right? Yes, we can see it. It is divided in two parts. The first one to present the organization and what does the organization do amid the challenges and situation we are facing now as electoral management bodies and association. I did the presentation in English in order for all the people who do not speak Arabic would be able to participate with us and follow us. We are an organization, the first regional Arab organization who was able to gather all the electoral management bodies in the Arab region from all the countries in order to create this network through which we will share our experiences, expertise, we communicate, and we work to enhance the practices of elections in the Arab countries, especially after the Arab Springs, Arab revolutions, and the change in the systems and the elections. And most of them because the elections were run by the state and regardless of its shape, in order to create several electoral management bodies. However, it is open to any independent agency or bodies or semi-independent bodies in the Arab countries. In 2015, we launched our activities in 6 founding members countries, and now we have 12 members. Therefore, 12 Arab countries are permanent members in this organization, and they convene annually every year in a specific date at the beginning of the year. Therefore, we can describe ourselves as an independent organization. We are not political, and what I mean in this, we do not represent the government of the states, of our states. We are a professional organization, an Arab organization, regional organization, and we aim at enhance the performance of elections of the electoral management bodies in the Arab countries. We work to encourage the work, the common work between all the EMBs. Although we strengthen the cooperation between the Arab EMBs at the regional and international levels, we support exchanging information and we provide technical support for the member states, and also we enhance communication and cooperation between the different electoral bodies and institutions of civil societies in the different countries through implementing the several activities which will have an impact and which will be reflected in the work of the civil societies. The main achievements that we did, we organized several workshops on different topics that were chosen by the members through our annual meeting. We had also workshops on voters registration, on independency of EMBs. We had also a special workshop on how to enhance women participation in election, and the latest workshop was before the COVID-19 pandemic, or with the COVID-19 pandemic, was about the media and elections and the regional election visit programs in Mauritania. We also do the regional visit program in the Arab countries in order to learn from their experiences, not observe the elections in these countries. We visit the local municipal elections in Jordan. We also had a visit for the elections in Tunisia, as well as the latest elections in Mauritania. We provided technical support for Somalia in order to register the political parties through sending experts from the Arab countries working in the EMBs from the member states. We sent them to the country who requested this support. We also established, based on a recommendation after the workshop that we did on enhancing the women participation in election, we established a regional network for women in election. This is a support network under the umbrella of the organization. However, it is independent. It has its own programs, activities, and strategies in order to implement its work to enhance the participation of women in elections. Nowadays, we are working on preparing a network for youth, the youth, from which we will stem other networks that will support it, because we do not want to be a bureaucratic organization. I can hear background noise. We do not want to become a bureaucratic organization. However, we rely on the mutual cooperation between all the management bodies, and we do regional studies as well. We did a study related on women and on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on elections. We participated, and we have a lot of partnership with the regional and international organizations such as Venice Commission, IDEA, IFS, UNDP, AWEB, ACEEO in Europe, and we aim at having a partnership with the African Federation on this level. I will move now to the main topic now, which is COVID-19 and the challenges imposed by this pandemic. In March, we made a primer study, to see how this pandemic and its fast spread affected the work of the EMBs. And it's not known that the study showed that all the EMBs in the Arab regions, and I'm sure at the international level as well, were surprised by this pandemic and its impact. And then they had to make changes in order to make these elections successful, as Mr. President says, between what we have to do, the elections, and the health impact. And what are the procedures and measures that were taken by the government to face this pandemic? For example, I will name 3 things happened within the study. The capacity to do what they have to do was affected greatly. At 80% in all the countries, the 12 countries who participated in the statistics, they said that on the agenda of 2020, they had 3 electoral activities. One of them was had to be stopped, and the other 2 elections back then were not. No decision were made about them. On the other level, in general, the pandemic affected the capacity of the EMB to work, because we had either low resources, human resources, or the human resources were not able to go and to be in place, as well as we faced a lot of challenges that 60% of the staff were not able to go to work, and this affected their work as well. We look ahead in the organization to do the following. Nowadays, we are updating the study on the impact of the pandemic in details. We do not want to talk in general about the impact. We delve in details about the measures and procedures that the EMBs will take on the 4 level levels of the elections, how to facilitate the votes, how to present the candidacy, how to do the ballots, and how to declare the results. This study that we did, and we will update it in a few days, and we will send it to the member states and non-member states in the organization. We look in details in each one of these axes in order to know whether these EMBs did and set up plans, and if they had plans, how they implemented the measures in every axis in order to hold webinars, special webinars on each one of these axes, not to reach a common framework between the countries, but to see and know what is happening in the countries, how they are thinking about these axes in every country, and maybe to reach a general framework to take as a reference or to use it from the countries based on the law in each country. These consideration will be taken by the countries, especially what's related to the legal aspect of the elections. So, in this way, we started to play a catalyst role to discuss, to share expertise on the regional level, and we knew about the experiences of each country in order to answer and respond to several questions. The first, there's one part of people say that the democracy can wait because the health is a national priority. As we can say, if the democracy is a right for the citizens, every citizen has the right to have a good health, and therefore the pandemic is a risk for the citizens. Therefore, we follow the school or the literature that said that if there is any problem in every country or in any country, we need to reach a balance between responding to the challenges, regardless whether the crisis is a pandemic or any other thing. We have other people who say that why do I have a problem? Why am I worried about that? Since I don't have an election agenda for 2020, let us wait and let us see how the other countries are responding, and we take what the other countries are doing and we implement it in our countries. We are convinced, at least, that this pandemic will not end in 2020. Maybe it will go through 2021 and God knows when it will end. And therefore, we are working on changing this way of thinking, or even delete it or remove it, in order to reach new aspects to see how we can face this challenge in special measures. I'm also talking in Palestine, for example. When we started to think about this issue in March or in April, some of the staff or some of the heads in the EMB asked a question: why don't we do this as an academic exercise? Based on the fact that it expresses our preparedness, and therefore we need to put the different scenarios, regardless whether we have some election agendas for 2020 or 2021. We are talking about 2021 because it's the closest year. Therefore, we need to be creative and we need to be efficient and interactive, and not say we are just an implementing body and we wait for the decision of the state or of the government, and we wait for the health instructions. Because as an organization, we are convinced that the preparedness should be in every EMB. Every EMB should be prepared, and they should say for the community that we serve that we are ready, we can implement the election on time, regardless of the challenges that we are facing, or these challenges are facing. As an independent organization, the EMB should hold the elections, and it should put the several and different scenarios in order to ensure the holding the election. So, as we said, we held several webinars about the stages of the elections in general. Excuse me, I have the last slide, which is not there. 1 week before the Jordan experience, who are thinking about planning for the elections, the parliamentary election that were for August, they set the scenarios, they looked into the measures. We listened to them last week. Today we will listen about the measures in Tunisia and Palestine. We are working on this level. All the EMBs asked that we should look into the need to implement training programs on how to use the electronic platform, especially in the training and awareness for the voters. And also, we need to share expertise between all the Arab EMBs, especially the experience of the countries who were able to hold the elections, in order to be able to network and the experiences and learn from each other experiences. I would like to end by saying that we are happy to share and to communicate with the African program and West Asia program in order to benefit from the expertise on the challenges that were imposed by COVID-19 pandemic. And also, we have also, as we are convening our webinars online at the Arab level, we are happy also to share with the Africa and West Asia about all our activities and program on the election level. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Mr. Hisham. Let me first welcome all the speakers and all the participants who joined us in this webinar. I would like to thank Mr. Hisham for this general overview on the role of the EMBs, Arab EMBs, the effective and the active role that they are working on sharing the expertise, finding solutions on the challenges that are faced by the EMBs, especially that we are today facing a common challenge between all of them as EMBs, and we need this kind of active role in order to take it as a reference. I thank you so much. I would also like to say that all the questions, all the participants and panelists, as well as their comments, we will be able to answer them, receive them, and answer them after finishing all the presentation. We will answer all the questions. I would like to remind you that, as it was mentioned before, in the box of messages, you can write your comments or your messages that you want. We will move now to the active and effective experiences in elections. We have 3 experiences from Guinea, Malawi, and Tunisia, in order to see how the EMB in these countries was able to manage the election and what are the challenges that these EMB faced amid the COVID-19 pandemic and how they were able to find solution for this pandemic. Let's start with Mr. Salif, who is the head of the EMB in Guinea. Mr. Salif?
Hello, I hope that everybody can hear me. Hello, I hope that everybody can hear me. Can you hear me? Once again, I'd just like to say that we're very grateful to IDEA. Thank you so much for this opportunity that you've offered to us to share our experience of organizing elections in the context of COVID-19. I'd like to start my presentation now. Just a few days ago, I learned something interesting and something very important. I was asked to help colleagues in their travels, colleagues who are currently on assignment. And my colleagues said, listen, you can put all the necessary measures in place, and you can put them all in place within the country. But it's really quite difficult. It's a delicate matter organizing elections within the context of COVID. There's the question of rights, the question of citizens' rights. And you will be made responsible of a precarious health situation. So you can imagine that all the EMBs who are organizing elections in this context are confronted with a high degree of responsibility. I'd like to say a few words about my presentation. I'll first be sharing some basic information regarding what we did in the last election that was held on March 22nd. I'll be talking about what we're doing currently related to the presidential elections that are set for October 18th. I'll be talking about the successes that we've had. And then I'll be continuing on. The pandemic is a worldwide reality. There is a global dimension. There are over 213 territories in the world affected by COVID, so this is truly a global issue. Africa is a less affected continent thus far. But there are health conditions and poverty conditions that play an important role as well. So Africa will surely feel the consequences of COVID. And we believe that everyone will be affected by the pandemic. And this is why we're having this meeting here today. We have economic, social, and electoral, of course, conditions to take into account and consequences. Democracy could suffer if we do not take on our full responsibility. There are two kinds of rights that are in conflict: the right to health, as well as the right to vote. How can we reconcile these two rights? This is quite an issue. And it's quite difficult to allow these rights to coexist. In Guinea, we discovered our first positive case in March. And then today we have 6,359 positive cases. At least 5,012 people have healed. That's between 79 and 80% of the people who have been tested. This was possible thanks to the efforts of the Ghanaian authorities, whose ANSS, the National Health Agency, has taken certain measures. There are quite a few measures that other countries are also applying, such as a curfew, closed borders, and such. The President of the Republic decided that masks would be distributed freely to the population. And this was very important because we were able to distribute these to our agents. This means that people are able to follow the recommendations because they must wear masks obligatorily. I'd just like to add a note on past elections. We had a referendum that put our new parliament in place. We organized these elections at the very beginning of the presence of COVID in our country. We only had a handful of cases. So it was not a really serious or dangerous situation at that point. However, we nonetheless implemented certain measures. For example, we put sanitization stations at the entrance to the voting stations. We required people to wear masks. And the number of people who could enter into the voting station was also limited. And also, social distancing rules were required. Once again, everyone in the room had to wear a mask. Unfortunately, our president, peace be upon him, was among the victims of COVID. And we believe that it is really important to recognize all of the work that he did. This is the president of our Independent Electoral Commission. And I'd like to now talk about some of the things that we're doing now. We are currently organizing the presidential elections for October 18th. With my colleagues at the Electoral Commission, we closed our facilities after the elections were over. Everyone was obliged, all staff members were obliged to take vacation time because many people could not come into the office, and we decided to close them. We began to come in once again, but it was a staggered return to work, a staggered return to the office. And so some people were allowed to come to the office first to take up their work once again. And up until Thursday, our technical assistants weren't even able to come back. So we've had this progressive, gradual return to work at the office. We've had 2 commissioners who have been looking into health questions. They've defined all the measures to be put into place. We worked with certain partners to, in a certain sense, convert our electoral organization into a fight against the virus. So certain activities were able to be switched over to fight the virus. This allowed us to have certain kinds of masks and other equipment. And then also screening, I'd like to mention that. And I'd really encourage other countries to take up this particular strategy. We've worked to train different members of our commission, different related people throughout the country. And what were we able to do now that we have this experience to share? In fact, we made all of the people working on elections take an obligatory COVID test. And people were not able to come into the prefecture, even in an area in the middle of the country, without taking a COVID test. Even chauffeurs were required to have this COVID test. And everyone who tested positive was required to take action. We replaced all service providers who tested positive. And now I'd like to conclude. Here's what I'd say are the lessons to learn from our experience, the Ghanaian experience. First of all, we have our staff within the country, and we shared a lot of recommendations regarding the conformity with the recommendations, for example, the required mask wearing.
Des éléments qui me paraissent pertinents.
The first one is that there's been an excellent collaboration, and among all the departments of our institutions, which collaborated jointly under the supervision of the Planning and Operations Department, which is expected to supervise all the activities, including the preparation of the missions. It is also the department that was in touch with the Commission and with the external world, to say so. And the internal collaboration was such that there has been some active complicity with the government through the health ministry and particularly the National Health Security Commission. And each time we faced some needs, or each time it was required, some tests they came up and provided the tests that were needed. So there's been some cooperation between the CENI and the health authorities in Guinea. And even at the last moment, we could escalate some issues. But the Senis, in my opinion, should be more open to other bodies, particularly those that are involved in the fight against the pandemic in our different countries. I'd like to conclude by saying that at the very least, the electoral bodies should not be a danger for the voters during the vote or beyond. So these are new challenges, and we should make sure that there's no electoral official with a threat for people's health. We must also draw the conclusion that today people should work further at home. Even those who were on mission have worked at home, and this should be extended to other organizations as we are doing today through conferences. Usually these require physical travel, but all these electoral bodies should really work further in this direction. This will need, of course, elections are very costly processes in Africa, so there is a challenge with the cost, and I want to thank you.
في البداية شكرا على هذا العرض الوافي الذي قدمت فيه تجربتكم كإدارة انتخابية في اتخاذ الإجراءات ومجابهة التحديات، خاصة وأنتم في قلب الجائحة ومع الظروف الصحية المنهكة، وأيضا قدرتكم على التواصل مع شركائكم في العملية الانتخابية ومع السلطات في غينيا وخاصة السلطات الصحية، وتمكنكم من احتواء هذا الأمر. أكيد سيكون هناك مزيد من الاستفسار حول التجربة الغينية، وستتمكن من أيضا تقديم بشكل أكبر حول هذا الموضوع. تسمحون ننتقل الآن إلى تجربة اللجنة الانتخابية في ملاوي مع السيد سام. سيد سام، الكلمة لك فلتتفضل. أشكرك. Sayed Sam.
Mr. Sam from Malawi, you have the floor.
يبدو أن هناك انقطاع. آمنة، يبدو أن هناك انقطاع مع السيد سام.
I will try to connect with Mr. Sam through WhatsApp. There seems to be a disconnect. Mr. Sam may have some internet problems, and I think he came back right now with us. We can give him a few seconds to join us.
Mr. Sam.
السيد سام عاد من جديد معنا.
Mr. Sam is with us again. Could you hear us?
Mr. Sam, can you hear us?
Mr. Sam, would you please unmute your mic? سهير على ما يبدو أن السيد سام له بعض المشاكل في الإنترنت. إذا ممكن ننتقل.
So here it seems that Mr. Sam has some internet connectivity problems. So could we move on to the next intervenant, the next speaker? Thank you, Wissal. Until Mr. Sam comes back to us. Maybe we can accept some questions for Guinea, because Mr. President is going to leave while we're waiting for Mr. Sam. Mr. President of Guinea, how were you able to control this COVID-19 issue? Do you have any circumstances that you can describe to us during this COVID-19 period? Please go ahead.
So I would like you to ask the question again, because I couldn't really understand.
سيتولون الترجمة إلى اللغة الفرنسية.
problème de réseau.
بخصوص الطواقم العاملة.
Je vous entends pas, je n'entends pas.
الترجمة متاحة الآن. بخصوص الطواقم العاملة.
With regard to your employees, how were you able to control your employees that are working with you in your offices, and how were you able to face the challenge of COVID-19 within your own organization?
The point is that we have provided relevant answers to this, responses to this crisis. As indicated, I have explained our intention, and all the workers had some mandatory leave, and then they resumed work in a staggered manner gradually. Today, all our staff are back to work, but they didn't come back to work at the same moment. Besides, the non-professional visits have been reduced, and on top of this, we have at least 400 people in the field who have left the capital city and who are covering the activities on the ground. So we asked for the support of the national health body that came here to do the testing of all those who had to go from point A to point B. Therefore, all those who were tested positive to COVID were suspended from the mission and were replaced by other colleagues. So all the people who went on mission, at least between 350 and 400 people, have all been tested negative to COVID. And this is how we managed to solve the situation. We are also organizing teleconferences, and the first one being the one when we make the decisions. All decisions related to electoral activities are taken at this level. In my office, I chair Zoom conferences. We use Zoom, and those who are in the room know what I'm talking about. So this is how we organize these meetings, and this was our response, our resilient response to COVID.
على هذا التوضيح. والآن ننتقل إلى إدارة الانتخابات في ملاوي.
Thank you, Mr. Cabinet, for this clarification. Now we move on to Mr. Sam. Could you hear us, Mr. Sam?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
نسمعك جيدا.
Je suis dans les pleines activités.
So do you If you allow me, I might have to leave, but from time to time, I will join you again if you allow me.
Right, that's fine.
Merci pour votre temps. Au revoir.
Thank you for your time and goodbye.
Should I proceed?
شكرا سيد كابينت، وأكيد إن كان هناك لدينا مزيد من الأسئلة سوف
Thank you, Mr. Cabinet. And if you have more questions, we will send them to you. We move on to Mr. Sam. Mr. Sam, you have the floor to talk about the experience of your country.
Shukran Jazira. Let me thank you for allowing me to join you in sharing Malawi experience in conducting elections under the COVID-19 environment. I have a very short presentation to make. First, I'll give the specific COVID-19 prevention measures, and then I'll give the challenges that we faced as an electoral commission implementing elections under COVID-19, and then I'll conclude. First, let me say that the presidential election in Malawi was held on 23rd June 2020. It was a court order because the court nullified the 2019 elections and then ordered the Electoral Commission to conduct a fresh presidential election within 150 days. So that 150 days started from 3rd February. And because it was a court order, it was non-negotiable in terms of whether to have this election or not because of the COVID-19 spread in Malawi. Since the first confirmed case of COVID-19 in Malawi on 2nd April 2020, there had been a gradual but a steady increase in number of cases up to a point where political activity heightened due to the elections. As of 2nd June 2020, there were only 358 total cases confirmed in Malawi. But as we are talking today, after the election on 23rd June 2020, the cases have increased to close to 3,000, with 61 people dead. The COVID-19 specific measures in terms of prevention. Malawi Electoral Commission procured personal protective equipment for staff working in the field as well as working in the headquarters. This personal protective equipment included masks for the face, hand gloves, and then there were also water buckets and hand wash soap. Hand sanitizers were provided during the electoral activities. That included voter registration processes, training of field staff, as well as all meetings with electoral stakeholders in the field. Social distancing was observed when conducting all meetings, trainings, as well as during the electoral activities such as voter registration and even polling. And we also had posters which were talking about the importance of following COVID-19 preventive measures. As an electoral commission, we had all pregnant female staff, as well as all staff that had chronic diseases sent home so that they should not be at risk of contracting the disease. So that was one of the measures we took as an electoral commission. In addition to that, civic and voter education delivery channels were limited to radio, television, print media, social media, and loud hailers. So the use of all crowd pooling civic and voter education activities were suspended to ensure that as an electoral commission, we should not be part of the spread of COVID-19. In terms of challenges, we had budgetary challenges because when we were planning for this particular election, we did not anticipate the COVID-19 pandemic. So all the procurements that were done were outside the budget that was approved by Parliament. We had to do it because we had to protect the people. So we had to spend about $1 million to ensure that we have equipment, protective equipment, and all materials. Apart from our own spending, we had development partners who came in, UNDP, as well as US Embassy, came in and donated protective materials as well as hand sanitizers and everything to ensure that we have adequate procurement of the COVID-19 preventive materials. Then there were also extra payments made for services such as transportation due to measures which were limiting the carrying capacity of buses and vehicles. So we had to spend a lot in terms of transportation because of that. There was also limiting of public gatherings because one of the measures in the country is to only allow a maximum of 100 people per gathering. So all our trainings, all our activities had to limit the capacity to only a maximum of 100. So that meant quite a lot of training sessions, very expensive, but we had to do that. Other challenges was to do with the enforcement of COVID-19 prevention measures to other stakeholders other than the Electoral Commission. You are talking of political parties. Much as the Electoral Commission was very strict in adhering to the COVID-19 preventive measures, when the campaign period started, it was very difficult for political parties to observe and adhere to the COVID-19 preventive measures, especially the wearing of face masks for every supporter who went to attend the political rally, as well as the social distancing. This was completely something that they could not adhere to. The Electoral Commission staff capacity was negatively affected because of sending other people home due to their vulnerability to contract the disease. The staff capacity was adequately or negatively affected. It was also impossible during the electoral process to have the international observers, which is a norm, which is an international best practice. But this time around, we did not have international observers coming into the country because of travel restrictions. Apart from that, we also had issues which other colleagues, other presenters or panelists have also raised in terms of the country and citizens appreciating the right to health and taking it as a priority than the right to vote. This was very prevalent. People wanted to do away with the voting, whether within the COVID-19 environment or not. In conclusion, despite all these challenges and despite implementing the electoral activity under the COVID-19 pandemic, the Commission ensured that all activities for the presidential election had been successfully implemented in accordance to the law. The voter turnout during the election was 64.81%, which is not bad compared to the 74% in 2019 elections. And the null and void votes were 1.26%, which was lower than the 2019 one, which was 1.54%. With this, the Commission is fully satisfied that the election was credible and that the result was a true reflection of the will of the people of Malawi. And most importantly, we have not received any dispute from all the contestants in this election. Finally, let me say this. Yes, we can have elections conducted under the COVID-19 environment, but the aftermath of that election is perhaps disastrous. I think this is what we are now observing in Malawi, that before the electoral process, we only had about 300 positive cases, but now we are talking of 3,000 cases, which is an exponential increase of positive cases. And I think that has been attributed mostly to the electoral process that we had. And looking at most of or some of the people who have lost their lives, who have died due to COVID-19, some of them are high-profile politicians. And that tells you they were exposed during the campaign period or during the electoral process. So this is something that electoral commissions and countries should think about. It's not how difficult to conduct this process under COVID-19 environment, but the aftermath, the consequences that countries should be prepared to face after implementing that electoral process. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you very much once again for inviting me to share Malawi experience on implementing the electoral process under COVID-19. Shukran Jazira.
شكرا لسيد سام على
Thank you, Mr. Sam, for giving us your experience. And we knew about the measures that were taken by your AMB and what are the preventive measures that you took, especially that it took you a lot of changes to make because you started to prepare for the elections before a COVID-19 pandemic, and how you were able to deal with this urgent and issue. Thank you for your presentation. We will have further questions after the presentation. We will ask you further questions. We will move now to the last presentation for the experience of Tunisia with Mr. Nabil Bafoun, the head of the election, chairperson of the Independent High Authority for Election in Tunisia. Mr. Nabil, the floor is yours. Mr. Nabil, can you open your mic, please? Open your mic, please. Your microphone is off. Can you switch it on, please? Click on the button below, in front of you. Your microphone is still off. Mr. Nabil, can you hear us? My microphone is on, and the camera is on as well. Therefore, if you can open your microphone. Mr. Nabil, try to talk to us without your headset, earpiece. Mr. Nabil, try to find if your microphone is on. Maybe the microphone of the computer is off and not the microphone of the application. Wissal, I'm talking to Mr. Nabil on the phone and he has his microphone on, but you cannot hear him. Just one moment, Emma. We are trying to find what's the problem. Wisal, can you hear me now? Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you very good. Yes, we can hear you and we can see you as well. Do you want me to start? Yes. The floor is yours. Shukran. Thank you, Mrs. Suhair. Shukran. Thank you, Suhair. Shukran. Thank you for all the participants for giving me this opportunity. In fact, Tunis had an experience with COVID-19 pandemic, and our experience was specific. How can we hold a correct elections while preserving the health of the citizens? The issue was sensitive. We planned in Tunisia to hold the elections, municipal elections, partial municipal election in Hasel Frid and Jbiniana, and the date was 29 March 2020. In fact, at that time, the body did not have any legal pretext to postpone or to annul the election or even to change the date, because the legal framework in Tunisia, and maybe it's the most legal framework in all the countries, does not include a possibility to delay the elections for health issues. We talked about force majeure that might lead to postpone the elections, but similar issue like a pandemic, it's not mentioned neither in the constitution, neither in the Tunisian law. Therefore, the first challenge for the EMB was how to delay or to annul the election. Since the EMB we had some powers in holding the elections, we took the decision and we talked and we made the general health and general benefit as priority in order to put on hold the municipal elections on the night of launching the electoral campaign, because the electoral campaign was organized to be held on 13th of March. So on 14th of March, we decided to put on hold the elections. Therefore, incidents came along, and as you know, the pandemic spread fast. Tunisia took the decision to do the lockdown, and therefore we had a decision to stop all the terms, and therefore all the legal intervention after taking the decision put the decision of the EMB in order. During this time, the EMB called and communicated with the Ministry of Health in order to put a health protocol or health guidelines on how to hold the elections while taking into consideration all the preventions that should be taken in order to prevent the spread of the pandemic. In fact, when we took the decision to postpone, we were afraid of the spread of the pandemic between the citizens, because we were sure that the voters' turnout would be maybe low. And then we were afraid that the ballot and the polls would be counted in closed areas and closed rooms, which will cause the spread of the pandemic to go fast in Tunisia, such as other countries, because we hold meetings during the elections, and all of these are risks and led us to take these decisions. In fact, this legal challenge in taking the decision to put the elections on hold was easier when we decided to continue with the elections, because we had a decision in Tunis that put on hold all the terms, the election terms and other governmental terms for another date. Therefore, the EMB was had to continue the elections after the terms were continued, and so we declared that the elections will take place later on. But before continuing the election, we took all the measures with the Ministry of Health in Tunisia we prepared a health guide, that will help in organizing the elections while taking the preventive measures to prevent the spread of COVID-19. I will try to share with you the presentation on the screen in order to see the measures that were taken by the EMB and the guide that were approved by the Ministry of Health. This health guide included all the details of the elections, starting from the election campaign, because this guide prohibited the mass gathering for more than 30 people. So the electoral meeting would be held in groups not exceeding 30 people, and we prefer to hold it in open areas and taking preventive measures such as social distancing, 1 meter between each one of the people in the meeting, wearing masks, sanitizing the hands, and other measures. These measures continues as well, and they are mentioned in this guide. We continued them on the election day. Well, when we had to take one pen from a number of pens after finishing the election, this pen would be sanitized again, and the other voter will take another pen. Regarding the masks, wearing masks was enforced on all the participants in the elections, and we are talking now about the active and realistic challenges other than the legal challenges that we faced. The active and realistic challenge is financial challenge. How can we provide all these materials, masks, hand sanitizers? So we had to provide an additional budget. The EMB was able to provide these materials, and we were able to provide 8,000 masks, and we gave them to the voters who would come without a mask, because in the health guide it was clear that every voter should come with wearing his own mask. But in order to open the opportunity of the right of voting for all the citizens, the High Authority for Election in Tunisia provided masks for all the voters who came to the poll centers without a mask. In fact, what we did not expect is the ink, electoral ink. We expected that the electoral ink would be a mean of transferring this COVID-19, but the Ministry of Health said otherwise, and the lab analysis said that the nitrate presented in the ink of the election will not allow the pandemic to spread, and therefore citizens can use this ink without a risk of spreading the virus. These preventions were abroad, also spread beyond the election centers. We were aerating the centers, and also we wanted to preserve the independency, and how can we provide for every voter his own space to elect. So we took the necessary prevention to preserve the secrecy of elections. This is in the election centers. Also, we faced another challenge with the governors and with the social distancing. We also, for the observers, we asked the observers to respect the social distancing. We also decided that gathering the polls and counting the votes would be in open areas. This cost us financially, In fact, we had additional expenses, but we can say that we were able to preserve the health of the voter and all the people participating in the elections through the preventive measures that we took according to the health guide approved by the Ministry of Health. This health guide, before starting the election, was accompanied by a cultural video that was circulated among all the people on the social media and online for the voters to know how to deal with these preventive measures and these precautions during the elections. What we noticed is that the voters' turnout was lower in comparison with the previous municipal elections because same in 2018, we held elections in these two municipalities, and the voters' turnout was higher than this year. Was this because of this election were partial? And we are used that the voters' turnout is lower in the partial elections, or is it due to the fear of elections for the spread of COVID-19? The High Authority for Election is still analyzing and evaluating why the voters' turnout was low. Was it because of COVID-19 or because it is a partial election? We will give you a example that in Hassi Alfred, the voters' turnout was lower, from 51.6 was 36.4, and in Janbaya from 30.7 to 18.9. In conclusion, such meetings and such gatherings could be beneficial, highly beneficial, because in fact, we do not know whether COVID-19 will end in 2020 or in 2021 or else. Therefore, electoral management bodies should take the precautions, necessary precautions, not only health precautions, because health precautions are something well and due in making protocols and the partnership with the Ministry of Health on how to implement those preventive measures, starting from the electoral campaign to the election, to the ballots, to the counting the votes. But there are additional measures that should be taken into consideration as well during such pandemic. We need to make sure that we have a good legal framework and basis to hold the elections within these special preventive measures. We in Tunisia found a great difficulty in holding and put on hold the elections or postpone them. There are other considerations that we should respect: the right to freedom, the right to gathering, the right to participate in the election, and how we have to put this and to hold this and to stop this gathering during the COVID-19 pandemic, so that it should not be legally seen as forbidding people to gather. As you know, all the EMB should present their budgets for the elections beforehand. Now we should take into consideration, when providing our budgetary plans, the health impact and the health measures that should be taken into consideration. I think that all these points and issues should be taken into consideration and are points of interest in the coming phases. We cannot say that this is a phase that will phase out or stage that will phase out and we will go back to life as it is. I say that we need to take all the precautions and all the preventive measures, because all the constitutions and all the legal framework, they sometimes talk about exceptional elections for some reason or another, and this happened in Tunisia in 2019. We had the president of the republic died, and we had to do pre-elections, and we have to do before the date, and we had to set up a plan, realistic plan, budgetary plan on how to hold the election within a pandemic or within health conditions. We need to take this into consideration for the democratic transition and for the continuance of the democracy in all our countries. Another question: will the EMB be able to achieve the balance between the safety of the elections and the safety and the health of the citizens? This is what we are asked for, and thank you for your invitation. Thank you, Mr. Nabil, for your presentation related to the Tunisian experience and how you work to face this challenge, whether the legal challenge or the health challenge or the financial challenge as well, and all the changes that you made on your measures in order to achieve the success of the election. As we can see from our panelists in this webinar, we have several questions. If you allow me, I will start with the question. We have a question for Mr. Sam. You mentioned that there's a relation between the increase of number of the people infected after the election. How were you able to link between the increase in number of affected people and the elections?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
نعم أسمعك واضح تفضل.
Yes, I think.
Yes, we can hear you.
Did an explanation to say before the election or before the electoral process, we had very few cases of COVID-19, and the rate of increase was really insignificant, very low. But after the electoral process, the increase has been so high, exponentially high, and most of the cases that are affected are those who are very politically active, high-profile politicians, those linked to the candidates, the candidate staff, and that tells you where this exponential increase is coming from. So that's how we are linking this exponential increase to the political activity or the elections that we had recently. Thank you.
أشكرك.
Thank you, Mr. Sam. We also have another question related to redoing the election. You mentioned about redoing the election. Can you tell us about the reasons why?
Yes, we had a court case after the tripartite elections in 2019. We had local government, parliamentary, and presidential election all at once on May 21, 2019. But after the elections, we had a court case where two of the presidential candidates had queried the Electoral Commission's conduct of the electoral process. And they cited quite a number of areas that they thought were not handled properly. They were irregular, and they wanted the election to be conducted again. So after the long court process, the court found that the Electoral Commission did not follow the law to the letter. Some of the laws, the electoral laws, were not properly followed. There were irregularities in the process, though those irregularities were not meant to favor any particular candidate. The court said the election is to do with the law. The election had to be of high quality, And in so doing, the Electoral Commission had to be ordered to conduct a fresh presidential election. One of the areas that were faulted by the court was the use of correction fluid, popularly known as TPEX, on the results sheets or the results forms. The court found that to be very irregular and not in order, and therefore they ordered that the election be annulled and then a fresh election be held. So this election in 2020 was a result of that court determination.
أشكرك.
Thank you, Mr. Sam. Now we have a question for Guinea. Can you hear us? Mr. Cabinet, can you hear us? Mr. Cabinet, can you hear us?
Peut-être déplacé, je suis revenu là. Oui, oui. Allô?
الحملات الانتخابية وتم ضبط حملات الأحزاب كيف هل تسمعني؟ هل تسمعني الآن جيدا؟ كيف تم
How were you able? Can you hear me now? How were you able to regulate the electoral campaign made by the political parties, and were you able to allow all the candidates to participate among the measures that you took? Mr. Cabinet, can you hear us? I think there's a problem in the communication and connection with Mr. Cabinet. I will try to call him on WhatsApp, but we can continue the question to Mr. Sam. It is a reiterated question. You already mentioned that some political parties did not abide during their campaigns with the measures. How you dealt with this stuff and how were you able to control it?
Shukran. It was very difficult to enforce the COVID-19 preventive measures on political parties. It was not our mandate as an electoral commission. It was upon the government to do that because the preventive measures were imposed by government, not the electoral commission. Suffice to say that it was a concern because it was our process. What we did was only to request or implore on the political parties to strictly adhere to the preventive measures. But this did not work. No, the reason why it did not work is that they used their usual way of campaigning, bringing thousands of people together and pass on their campaign messages. This was due to the fact that, internet penetration in the country is low, and they could not use the electronic means to reach out to people in the rural areas where internet is almost non-existent. So all they required to do was to use the conventional way of campaigning, bringing people together in hundreds of thousands, pass on their messages, and that's where we had problems. And it was very difficult to restrict that kind of campaigning because they had to pass on their campaign messages for people to make informed choices. So that's what we faced. Government tried. We have a task force on COVID-19, which tried to talk to the political parties, all of them, because all of them never followed the preventive measures. But this did not work because they had no other better option than bringing people together and pass on their campaign messages. Thank you very much.
شكرك على هذا التوضيح. ننتقل إلى السيد نبيل، لديك بعض الأسئلة. أولا لديك طلب من السيد هشام بمشاركته الدليل الصحي بعد إذنك لو سمحت.
هناك أيضا عدة
There's several questions.
هل تم استحداث أو إجراء أي تعديلات؟
First question, were there any modifications
غير إدخال البروتوكول الصحي كونكم تتحدثون عن
with regard to fighting COVID-19, as you were talking about the limitations of time that you had? I will send you the health protocol. Regarding the changes in measures, these were practical measures to prevent from COVID-19. But the heart of the electoral operation and all of the processes that have to deal with the elections, we did not change much of them. We took all the preventive measures in order to make sure that the electors and the officials are safe. All of the other standards have been implemented in order to make sure that everyone who came to the election offices in order to vote, we allowed them to vote. We wanted to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to vote and was able to vote. And we also stressed upon social distancing, and we provided everything that will guarantee the safety during the electoral campaign and electoral process, especially within the practical steps. Mr. Nabil, I would like to thank you. How were you able to control the electoral campaigns? Did you watch them? Did you follow them electronically, or were you there physically? We have watched Facebook and other social platforms, and we put teams in our regional administrations in Hassemjid and Jbiniana, and we followed all of the pages that have been declared as pages for the elections. So all of these pages were watched by the Commission during the electoral campaign. We watched also the elections on the field. During the COVID-19 preventive measure period, we wanted to make sure that all of the preventive measures were respected, and the health protocols that were that has been published by the Commission. So our observers were there to make sure that there were no more than 30 person in each gathering, that everybody is wearing masks, and the Commission has recorded some violations in some of these meetings. Was there an increase in the number of infected people in Tunisia after the elections? Fortunately, in Tunisia, the number of infections was not very high. Up till now, the number of affected people is very low. Even now, we have not recorded in Benyama any new COVID-19 cases. In August, in the next month, on the 29th and 30th of August, we have elections in 7 municipal elections. We are very worried about these elections, and we will take all of the preventive measures because as we open our borders and the return of Tunisians from outside Tunisia, and also the arrival of tourists into Tunisia, the COVID-19 now is more of a threat, more than May and June. Mr. Nabil, there is another question for you. You talked about a higher percentage, or a just slightly lower percentage in these events, in these elections, compared to the other elections. Is there any possibility that the number of electors or participants in the elections will be lower? This is a question that was posed to me. We had to make sure that we keep the number of the people present in the ballot boxes lower than 30. At 6 p.m. we had to bring all of the electors that are present to inside the school building, so that they can go in and vote at a later time. Even if that meant that we had to stay open a little later, or even late at night, so that we can make sure that everyone has the opportunity to vote. Thank you very much, Mr. Nabil. The question to Mr. Sam: did you have a particular protocol, a health protocol, that was put in place before the electoral campaign or the electoral process?
Thank you very much for the question. Yes, indeed, we had a health protocol, both at the Electoral Commission level as an Electoral Commission, for staff to adhere to. And then government instituted what I called in my presentation the preventive health measures, which were very, very prescriptive. But as I said earlier on, these preventive health measures were not strictly adhered to by the political parties. Let me just mention but a few of these preventive health measures. One was social distancing. Government said we should not be more than or less than a meter apart. 2, the wearing of face masks. 3, the use of hand sanitizers. The 4th one was washing of hands with the soap with in regular intervals of 20 minutes. And then there were restrictions in terms of gatherings. As I said, the gatherings were limited to only a maximum of 100 per gathering, 100 people. These were on the part of the preventive health measures imposed by government. Government almost imposed the lockdown, which was challenged in court, and the court ruled that the country should not be on lockdown, and perhaps that's why the election took place. On part of the Electoral Commission, we said we should, as Electoral Commission staff, both in the offices and in the field, use the face masks. We should use gloves. We should observe the social distancing. We should also ensure that those who have chronic health conditions stay at home. They should not participate. If anything, they should wait at home. Those who are pregnant as well, female pregnant staff, we are sent back home to ensure that they are not exposed to the health hazard and catch COVID-19. So indeed, these were in place, and what was lacking was enforcement on the part of the other stakeholders in the electoral process, especially all the political parties. Thank you very much.
شكرا جزيلا سيد سام. طيب أود أعرف إذا
Thank you very much, Mr. Sam. I'd like to know if there is anyone here in any electoral commission here that has any question to the panelists. This is an opportunity for us to get together and ask questions. Do you have any questions or any comments?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to find out whether any of the countries that have conducted elections during the COVID-19 pandemic have conducted any research or survey to establish whether the election has had an impact on the spread of COVID-19. Because for us in Malawi, we are only speculating, and I just wanted to learn whether there is really tangible evidence on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, on the impact of elections on the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
شكرا. إن كان هناك
Thank you very much. Is there anyone that would like to respond or answer this question? And we can move on to the president of the commission in Guinea. There are several questions that were directed to him, and he spoke about this this issue. Do you hear us? Can you hear us, Mr. President? I believe that نعم
تفضل سيد تفضل.
Please go ahead.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, il semble qu'il y a une question.
Thank you very much. It seems to me that there is a question that has been addressed to me concerning the measures taken by Seni Guinea during the electoral campaign. I wish to insist that there hasn't been any case in the context of COVID-19 during the campaign, and if I rely on the partial votes and the partial results of the 22nd March referendum, it was almost at the beginning. So the vote took place at that moment when there were just 4 or 5 cases. Today, we are preparing the presidential elections that have been scheduled for October the 18th, when we will be really confronted with that issue. During the Seni, I'd like to say that we haven't had the opportunity yet to really think it over, because as you can imagine, we are working on a step-by-step basis. And it is our first or second activity that consists in revising the electors list by August the 15th. And when the electoral campaign will start, when the electoral campaign starts, there's not only Seni that intervenes in this process, in particularly the High Communication Authority, which is responsible for the campaign, and we will sit together with this authority to really determine the best approach. We'll also rely on the experience in other countries, other African countries that have already undergone that situation of electoral campaign facing the COVID crisis. So this is where we are in Guinea.
تسمحوا لنا
Thank you very much for this clarification, and I would like to thank everyone who has intervened. There are several questions. However, we are out of time, almost out of time. We will send questions electronically through emails and or through this platform. and we will get the answers for you when we, and I apologize for the fact that we don't have enough time. From the presentations that we have listened to, we know that these are the first steps and the first experiences to fight COVID-19 or to take preventive measures during the elections to fight COVID-19. We are facing this problematic all over the world, and it is imperative. Amna, would you be able to mute somebody's mic is creating a lot of noise? I believe it's Mr. President, the President's mic. Could you please mute it? This platform is an opportunity for us so that we could exchange these experiences and we could get solutions to this, to these challenges that we have as electoral commissions. We could move on right now to listen to some final observations and final words. Presentation by Mr. Bilal and by Mr. Amna, who is representing Mr. Abidayu, who was not able to come because he has a problem with connections. Mr. Mohammed, if you have any conclusion comments, please go ahead. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Suhair. Thank you. We in Mauritania have listened to you with a lot of interest, and we have nothing more to give you. We have completed the elections before COVID, and the next elections are going to be after 2021. So we would like to learn from you. We don't have much to give you. I have noted some very important points, and I hope that these this would be spread all over the electoral commissions, which is the manual, the health manual experience. And I believe that this idea, I hope that this idea will be spread all over these countries. By way of an agreement with the Ministry of Health in each country, so that we can all benefit from this type of manual, of health manual. And I recommend to revisit all the laws in light of any emergency, a state of emergency that might end or that might change. All of the legal procedures right now are based on regular circumstances. However, now, because we are going through special circumstances, we have to have special laws that will answer to the special circumstances in a way that does not hamper the freedom of speech, freedom of gathering, and democracy, and also remote voting. I believe that this is very important. From the three experiences that we heard, I saw that the physical voting was implemented. We have to open the possibility maybe to think about whether there is a possibility of remote voting because of the social COVID-19 or social distancing measures. And I would like to thank you on behalf of the Arab Institute Organization for Electoral Bodies, and I would like to thank the International Democratic Institute for its great effort. And I would like to thank the interpreters and all of the presenters, everybody who participated or had a hand in the success of this meeting. And I would like to give you good news. This is the beginning of similar meetings that we will have, webinars that we will have, so that we can share information with one another and learn from one another in terms of organizing elections, knowing that the most important thing is to hold the elections at the time that was prescribed for those elections, and really postpone elections only if it's absolutely necessary. And we recommend that all the measures that would take place should take place after consulting all of those, or the authorities or the parties, the stakeholders, the ministries and the civil society organizations, so that it could not be seen as a violation of rights or democratic rights of citizens. And thank you very much. We have learned greatly from the experience of Tunisia, Mali, and Guinea, and we hope to learn a lot from more experiences. And thank you, and may the peace of God be upon you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed, for these comments, these very important recommendations, and I hope that this platform would be a platform that would allow us to implement many more measures, preventive measures. I move on now to Ms. Amna. Please give us your remarks and your final remarks on this subject. Thank you very much, Ms. Suhail. It is very hard to follow in the footsteps of Mr. President of the Arab Institute. Because because after him it's very hard to speak or to even compete with him. I'd like to say that this pandemic has allowed the electoral campaigns and electoral bodies to concentrate their efforts throughout the world. However, the responses were different from one country to another. We saw this from this meeting. We were happy to hear about the Guinea and Malawi experience and the Tunisian experiences, and the general overview that Mr. Hisham gave us and the questions that he has asked within this context. So I would like to say that these answers, these responses are in respect of human rights and democratic rights, and also guaranteeing the health of the public. Reaching a compromise between these two elements is not very easy or evident. I think this is the main idea, and the great and the huge question to open up horizons to hold coming meetings. I would like to thank, in addition to the interpreters, or Mrs. Claire, Mr. Abdullah Al-Omari from the Arab organization, and Ms. Wisal from the International Institute of Democracy, and Mr. Sam Al-Fandika, Mr. Kabine Sisse, Mr. Nabil Bafour, Mr. Hisham Khail, for their attention and their time that they have devoted to a meeting with us and exchanging their experience and expertise from them. And I would like to ask the participants, especially Mr. Sam Al-Fandika, to send us the protocol so that we can share it with the rest of the speakers, and also Mr. Baffoon has done the same thing, and you could find this document that he has shared with us within the webinar documents. And I would like to also thank our colleague Suhair for facilitating this workshop and for her efforts. And the recording of this meeting. You will find the recording of this meeting on our official page on Facebook, and we will send it also to the Arab organization and to all of the speakers who participated in this meeting, so that everyone can take advantage and learn from this meeting. And hopefully this will be the one and the first of the experiences that will allow us to benefit all over Asia and Africa. Thank you, Amna. Thank you, Sal. Thank you, everyone. We would like to continue. We have to compromise also between the democratic rights and the rights of safety, and we would like to thank the International Democratic and Democracy and Election Assistance for organizing this meeting. We would like to thank the interpreters and the participants who have posed great questions, and thank you very much to all of you. Goodbye.